Economic Deceptions, Money, the Root of All Evil, Part 10, the Fiat Paper Money Crash, Problem, Reaction, Solution. Interviewer, you also said that capitalism can be linked to the new imperialism. Instead of bombs, instead of nuclear weapons, capital is a new weapon. Can you tell me more about that? Dr. Matier bin Mohammed, in the old days you needed to conquer a country with military force, and then you can control that country. Today, it's not necessary at all. You can destabilize a country, make it poor, and then make it request help. In exchange for the help that is given, you gain control over the policies of the country. And when you gain control over the policies of a country, effectively you have colonized that country. Triffin's Dilemma. Economist Robert Triffin in 1960 saw the main problem with the dollar's reserve status. In order to stimulate the world economy, America must run persistent large deficits, creation of debt-based money out of thin air. The dilemma was that eventually you would go broke and that would lead to a collapse. The idea was that a more powerful currency needed to be created to supplant the dollar so the dollar could be depreciated, eliminating the debt without collapsing the world economy. So they're basically saying that their goal is to destroy the dollar, but to have another currency there ready for backup to take its place. This is the final goal of the global bankers for world domination. This is the problem, reaction, and solution. They create the problem, they wait for the inevitable reaction, and they already have a solution waiting in the wings to quote-unquote save us, when this was already their plan. This is The Rise of the Phoenix, as they put it. This is a magazine from 1988, and the economist here predicted a collapse in a new world currency by 2018, the year that we're living in. And we can see these things occurring around us right now. It says, get ready for a world currency. And look at this phoenix rising. And you have this 2018, this is 10, and this is a gold coin. And they're using this, burning the US dollars, as you can see, and all these other dollars and all these other currencies. And it's stating to you, they're putting it, flaunting it in front of your face. Get ready for a world currency. The IMF has had a blueprint for world currency since at least 1969, and they call it the Special Drawing Rights, or SDR. It is an international reserve asset amongst participating members. The value of the SDR was initially defined as an equivalent of 0.888671 grams of fine gold, which constitutionally was also equivalent to $1. The SDR is now redefined as a basket of currencies, and today consisting of the euro, Japanese yen, pound sterling, and the US dollar. So following the logic of the international bankers, they will offer this or something similar to this as a savior from the weak dollar. A global currency, of course, only delays the day of reckoning, but allows for further concentration of power. This then leads to a new dilemma of what replaces that. It does not address what a nation would do if they need to raise funds to fight war or natural disaster. This once again plays into the Babylonian elitist hands of eliminating any threat to their global power. Venezuela is currently going through a banking crisis, and in this case, what would they do if they had a military threat or an attack to their nation? This is exactly what these bankers want. If the bankers control the means of financing a war machine, they not only control the fate of the country, but then the country is no longer able to even defend itself. And through the pressure of all the economics, the bankers can seek to rally any nation it seeks to gain from this system into a war and hopefully destroy that nation. Here's a video recently from Al Jazeera talking about Venezuela and what's happening there.
The economy is going into a spiral of dysfunctionality.
Venezuela has, of today, the highest inflation in the world.
Venezuelans today cannot eat. You see people eating from the garbage.
Hospitals that have massive deaths of newborns, and there is no access to medication.
A cycle of violence and street protest.
Chavez was seen very much so as, a man of the people, the poorer people. And he identified with them and he loved them and they loved him.
He was very popular, he was very imaginative, but Chavez had a base of oil. He had a cash cow that never a leader in Venezuela had before.
When Chavez first came to power, oil was at roughly $7 to $9 a barrel. But by 2004, 2005, we're looking at oil price per barrel lifting at over $100 a barrel.
He has power and he has money. And so he decides new forms of social policies that can distribute the oil revenues in a more massive way downwards towards those that more need it, toward the poor.
Esta nuestra opción de darle poder al pueblo y especialmente a los más pobres, a los más débiles para que se levanten. Esta nuestra opción de construir un modelo económico desarrollado, moderno, productivo, diversificado, desarrollar al país.
So he went to Cuba, and Cuba came up with a bunch of new social programs. Massive new social programs for healthcare, for access to food, and for scholarships.
We have a whole raft of these so-called misiones, the social programs, which give people citizenship rights, identity cards, access to job training, access to breakfast clubs, university systems. So this is a very comprehensive effort to deliver basic social services.
What this is doing, though, is essentially still using oil as that redemptive quality to bring social change, while bringing social change, deepening the dependence on oil, and he can do this while the prices of oil are high.
The whole strategy of Chavismo initially was about diversification of the economy.
All right, I have to pause this because understanding from part 1 and part 2 that the US dollar is petrodollar. The US dollar has been seen as strong and safe, right? So understanding that the US dollar is dominant within all nations of all of the world, and now we see the redistribution of all these wealths, we see the centralization of healthcare in the US, and all of these nationalistic properties with a nationalistic president such as Donald Trump being in there, which is exactly what we saw was happening in Venezuela. It's to bring the country back to where it was supposed to be, right? The exact quotations of Trump himself. To redistribute this wealth and bring up the middle class is basically what he's saying. But it's a lie. And you'll see as we continue on where this all leads, okay? So understanding that the US dollar is no longer priced to gold and silver, it is priced to oil, and oil is the one that Venezuela used because of the price of it, and because of the great quantity and the great value of the oil, he was able to succeed in these things. But we'll see what happens. And just think of the US dollar. A lot of people are scared in these other countries that are going bust. They're investing in the US dollar. So the US dollar's propped up, just like oil was for Venezuela.
Reducing Venezuela's vulnerability to oil price bust. And in the initial Chavista model, this was hinged very much around processes of land reform, trying to reduce Venezuela's dependence on agricultural imports and food imports. What happens after the presidential elections of 2006 is that Chavez is bringing oil straight back into the center of Venezuela's economic model.
He had a high price of oil, and he had access to finance. He could borrow.
Again, this is what we're happening right now with this pipeline going between Canada down to Mexico. All these people are getting all this money, and this is exactly what's happening today. So they were planning this way in advance, and they're using the same methods on us, and people don't see this happening.
As if it was going out of fashion.
And they're borrowing, going out of fashion.
He
Look at
decided that was the moment to radicalize the process.
Now we're radicalizing the process.
The Venezuelan government begins to embark on a very ad hoc, very clumsy process of nationalization.
Nationalism. Donald
Nationalizing
Trump.
really big, heavy state assets. So we're talking about the electricity sector, the oil sector,
This began
the
with
telecommunications
Barack
sector.
Obama.
He also went out and bought the Banco de Venezuela from the Spanish bank Santander. They went out and bought all the cement companies.
Nationalized
The
everything.
country lost most
All
of
private
its,
business gone.
Private business. People were prosecuted. Their assets were
And this is
taken
what's
by
coming.
the state. Chavez thought that didn't matter because he had resources to import.
We're importing to medicines, we're importing clothes, we're importing cars, we're importing everything. And we destroy the production.
We've already seen in the prior
capacity of
ones
the
that
country.
the
It
production
really doesn't have an
capability has
economic
already
model
been destroyed
more
in
than
the US.
bring back everything to the state control.
He's trying to understand what socialism looks like in Venezuela. And that's a big challenge. Because again, no one has done that yet. So at one level, does it mean creating parallel institutions?
You have basically a parallel state structure. Instead of reforming ministries and institutions, simply creating parallel structures such as the misiones themselves.
Look, I've worked for Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae both, and both of them are now combining with this other company called CSS, Consumer Solution Services. And this is exactly what's happening. They're buying all of our house mortgage-backed securities, and they're packaging them together, and now they're actually going to put them into one centralized area, which is called CSS. And all of this debt is owned by the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve is not even part of the U.S. government.
Rights, identity cards, access to job training,
For healthcare, for access to food, and for scholarships.
We have a whole raft of these so-called misiones, the social programs, which give people citizenship rights, identity
And look at
cards,
that,
access to
identity
job training,
cards.
access
These are
to breakfast
national
clubs,
ID cards that
university
are already
systems.
beginning to appear.
This is a very comprehensive effort to deliver basic social services.
What this is doing, though, is essentially still using oil as that redemptive quality to bring social change, while bringing social change, deepening
the dependence on the
oil.
dollar. You might as well
And
just
can do
remove
this
it.
while the prices of oil
And just
are
change
high.
it while the
The whole
price of the dollar
strategy of
is high.
Chavismo initially was about diversification of the economy, reducing Venezuela's vulnerability to oil
To
price
a dollar
bust.
price bust. Think of
And
it that
in
way.
the initial
Just replace
Chavista
it.
model, this was hinged very much around processes of land reform,
we're
trying to
seeing this.
reduce Venezuela's dependence on agricultural imports and food imports.
How much local
What happens after the
agriculture
presidential
do you even
elections
have
of
these days?
2006 is that Chavez is bringing oil straight back into the center of Venezuela's economic
The
model.
dollar.
He had a
Making
high price of oil, and he had
America
access to
great
finance.
again.
He could borrow as if it was
You could
going out of
borrow
fashion.
as if it's going out
So,
of fashion.
He
Because you're
decided that
selling
that
your
was the
debt to
moment to
everyone
radicalize
else.
the process.
Todo aquello que fue privatizado, nacionalícese.
The Venezuelan government begins to embark on a very ad hoc, very clumsy process of nationalization. nationalizing really big, heavy
started,
state
again,
assets.
with
So we're talking
Barack
about the
Obama.
electricity sector,
It
the
started
oil
before
sector,
that, but
the
Barack Obama was really the
telecommunications
one that
sector.
started
He also went out
really pushing
and
this.
bought the Banco de Venezuela from the Spanish bank Santander.
They privatized
He went
Freddie
out and
Mac
bought
and Fannie Mae.
all the cement companies.
The country lost
Nationalism,
most
sorry.
of its
They're still national.
private
They bailed them
business.
out. They took
People
away the
were,
private business. And they're the ones that
prosecuted.
set it up in the first
Their
place.
assets were taken by the state. Chavez thought that didn't matter because he had resources to import.
We're importing to medicines, we're importing clothes, we're importing cars,
Think of
we're
China.
importing everything. And we destroy the production capacity of the country.
That's
It
what we
really
did.
doesn't have an economic model more than bring back everything to the state control.
Amen. That's where
He's
we are.
trying to understand what socialism looks like in Venezuela. And that's a big challenge. Because again, no one has done that yet. So at one level, does it mean creating parallel institutions?
You have basically a parallel state structure. Instead of reforming ministries and institutions, simply creating parallel structures such as the misiones themselves. So you've got high levels of expenditure on bureaucracy, on duplication of responsibility. All of this is becoming very onerous and expensive. The only way that this model can be sustained for Venezuela is through foreign borrowing.
They used the period of the oil boom from
The dollar
2004
boom.
to
Just say the dollar
2014
boom.
to sextuple the public debt.
We're at $21 trillion. And when Bush came in,
Oil
we were at
prices
$3
went
trillion.
up. Venezuela spent it all. They didn't set any money aside in a sovereign wealth fund and a rainy day fund. So they've got
There.
money in case things go down.
We have no money.
Everybody in the oil industry knows oil prices are cyclical.
So are dollar prices, right? The value of the dollar is cyclical. Goes up and down.
Chavez gets sick. He gets cancer. Meanwhile, many things begin to unravel.
Capital markets said, these guys are borrowing as if it was going out of fashion. So they sort of started to stop lending to the country.
Which
The
is
economy starts to go down,
China.
and people begin to say, wait a minute, before it's all gone, I'm going to get my piece of it.
Now, when Chavez had first come to power, he had said that essentially there was going to be a hard hand, an iron fist against these problems of corruption.
Does that sound
But the
familiar
reality
with
was that
Obama and
absolutely
Trump?
nothing was done.
Nothing.
So the end result is kind of decay,
A
of the
decay.
Chavista Bolivarian revolution.
that's the
and a
goal.
state which is becoming more and more indebted.
And more in
Biggest
debt.
sucker in Venezuelan history.
Debt is
the guy who's going
enslavement,
to
fellows.
follow
That's
Chavez
it.
as president. And that's exactly what happened.
That's what's gonna happen here, my friends. This didn't take long. You're talking 9 years. A hand-picked successor, and who was he hand-picked by? The U.S. government.
Maduro has inherited a legacy of oil dependence at a period when Venezuela has gone bust, and at a time when the oil price has gone bust.
In 2014, the economy was doing poorly, but as of June 2014, the price of oil started to go down.
When the price of the value of
the oil
the
price
dollar
started
starts
the
dropping,
government was
severe
had a
debt
severe debt
happens. You see?
and did not have enough dollars to buy the food imports and the medicine imports and all the good imports that it was
Now
buying
we're
before.
running into the issue.
And so, from one day to the other, the scarcity
And this is why you want to be
overwhelmed
outside of the
country.
cities, my friends.
The basic food, milk, rice, soap, toothpaste, these things disappeared.
Disappear.
Venezuela's total stock of foreign debt is about $150 billion. It's seeking to try and renegotiate with bondholders.
That's
but
only
the problem
billion.
is that
Ours
the
is in the
sanctions that the
trillions,
US has
friends.
imposed make it very difficult for Venezuela to roll over its debt.
The collapse of economic activity that started in 2014 worsened in 2015 and then went down the drain in 2016 and 2017 makes this period from 2013 onwards the largest recession in the Western Hemisphere.
And when the dollar collapses,
History,
this is
almost
going to be
twice as
nothing.
large as the Great Depression
Nothing.
of the US.
inflation to reach
Maduro has
13,000%.
simply not addressed any of the problems or the legacy that he inherited from President Chavez.
If
And that's been very difficult
loaf of
for
bread is $1,
people who
it's
are not in that
$13,000
like
in a
loyalist
year.
circle around Maduro, profiting and benefiting and living the high life because they don't have to worry about going shopping every day or paying their bills. You know, the people actually in the street who are experiencing the dramatic and detrimental effects of the economic crisis are the ones
at
who are
these
saying,
hopeless
wait a minute, something's not right
This
here.
is why I'm here
You know,
showing
and
you these
in the
things,
end,
to prepare.
you know, Maduro can wipe
this
his hands
funny?
clean
No.
of as much as he
This
wants,
is
but he
real
is the
life
president.
or
So he
death.
becomes the one who is responsible.
This has to happen, though. Christ said it did. Anyways, all right, let's go further on that. It's just, I came across that and had to show it, so sorry to get so wound up, but it's amazing the similarities of the United States and Venezuela today. Now look at this. It says America's greatest export is debt, is its debt. And what is debt? That we already went over that. That's the U.S. dollar. It states, it's 2013 December. As an observer from across Atlanta, I am often perplexed by how much attention is paid to U.S. trade and fiscal deficits. The twin deficits come with a bevy of political baggage in America, but as largely insurmountable issues, they're irrelevant to the far more important debate America should be having about its debt. The trade deficit is a long-standing problem that is not easily solved. It principally arises from the world's demand for dollars. It's the same as Venezuela, the demand for oil. It's the world's demand for oil, but we have the world's demand for dollars, which is oil. The U.S. dollar is the world's reserve currency mainly because much of the world is settled in dollars, and all commodities, including oil and currencies, are priced in relation to dollars. So this is exactly what we see today. Now listen to this. December 27th, 1896. This goes and hits hard, okay? This was a letter written to the General Conference 1897. Now I want to show and show you that they're going to try to push this new currency, and it's going to be gold and silver based. And this is the phoenix that's rising. In this phoenix that's rising, they're going to try to deceive everyone. And this is a warning to us. This is a written warning that these are deceptive practices of Satan himself. Now listen. I have words to speak to our brethren who shall assemble in the conference of 1897. The present financial controversy, see appendix. Now listen, I'm going to go into the appendix next, but I'll go ahead and finish this out. But we're going to find out what this financial controversy is, okay? So I have found words to speak to our brethren who shall assemble in a conference 1897. The present financial controversy has been presented to me as one of Satan's masterpieces for these last days. There is a power moving from beneath, which is after the working of the great enemy. I supposed our own people would step softly and move more very guardedly, and keep themselves aloof from all these new issues in regard to what? The circulating currency. This is not the devising of God, the changing of the circulating currency. What will it affect? What? The circulating currency, what will it affect? It will cause a state of things that will bring oppression to the poor and create great distress, just like in Venezuela. It is one of the devil's schemes, and I thought those who believed the truth would not be deceived in the least degree upon this matter. But within the year 1896, matters have been presented to me which have made me tremble for our people. I have been where I heard conversations from those in positions of trust in their institutions, and there was great warmth and controversy over the different positions taken. The light given me was, this is the policy Satan has arranged to bring distress. So what is this appendix, and what is 1896, and why did I bring this up in a prior part as well? Okay, so what is this appendix? Here's the appendix, okay? The present financial controversy. This communication addressed to the General Conference session of 1897 and written in December 1896 related to the issues of the presidential campaign of William Jennings Bryan. Bryan was agitating certain monetary policies which he and his supporters felt held great promise. Some Seventh-day Adventists became involved in the issues. In her counsels, Mrs. White repeatedly emphasized that our work was that of proclaiming a third angel's message, and the Seventh-day Adventists, as a separate and peculiar people, should not be involved in political questions. So who is William Jennings Bryan, and what are these? She says circulating currency. What are these dealings with circulating currency all to do? And she also says that this policy Satan has arranged to bring distress, right? Here it is on Wikipedia, okay? William Jennings Bryan. This is from his first campaign for the White House in 1896. This is directly what she's speaking about. Bryan had an innate talent of oratory. He gave speeches, organized meetings, and adopted resounding resolutions that eventually culminated in the founding of American Bimetallic League, which then evolved Natural Bimetallic Union. Of course, these are unions again. And finally, the National Silver Committee. At the time, many farmer groups believed that increasing the amount of circulation and currency in circulation, commodities would receive higher prices. They were opposed by banks and bondholders who feared the effects of inflation. So when inflation starts to hit here in the United States, just like it did in Venezuela, you're going to see these people start to rise up and start talking about changing the currency. And the ultimate goal of the League was to garner support on a national level for the reinstatement of the coinage of what? Silver. With his support, Charles H. Jones of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch was placed on the platform committee, and Bryan's 16-to-1 plank for the free silver was adopted and silently added to the platform for the 1896 Democratic National Convention in Chicago. In order to avoid the controversy, as a minority member of the Resolutions Committee, Bryan was able to push the Democratic Party from its laissez-faire and small government roots toward its modern liberal character. So these are all small government roots. Does that remind you of Barack Obama and how they start to push its modern liberal character? Through these measures, the public and influential Democrats became convinced of his capacity to lead and bring change. Change. That's Obama, resulting in his being mentioned as a possible chairman of the Chicago Convention. Of course, it came from Chicago as well. I mean, look at the similarities of this. In 1893, the repeal of the Sherman Silver Purchase Act had resulted in a collapse of the silver market. And that's exactly where we are right now. Silver's at $16 an ounce. And Jesus himself was sold for what, $160? I mean, no, it doesn't make any sense. We know that the equilibrium is going to come, and he's trying to push this, but this is a deception of Satan as well. Bryan delivered speeches across the country for free silver from 1894 to 1896, and this is what the Adventists started to get into, building a grassroots reputation as a powerful champion of the cause. Beware of these people, and beware of this delusion, my friends. At the 1896 Democratic National Convention, Bryan lambasted Eastern moneyed classes for supporting what? The gold standard at the expense of the average worker. Here it is. He brings Christ into it. He unites church and state. He says the Cross of Gold speech delivered in July 9th, 1896, instantly made him the sensational new face in the Democratic Party. That same year, he became the first presidential candidate to campaign in a car donated by Mueller in Decatur, Illinois. Now, there's more, and you can do your research on this. But understand that this gold and silver stuff, this is going to start to get pushed once the dollar starts to collapse, and they're going to try to bring in some kind of digital currency, and they're going to back it with gold and silver. All right, so from this letter, she continues on this, right? This is the same. I have words to speak to our brethren who shall assemble in a conference 1897 to the present financial controversy. We just realized has been presented to me as one of Satan's what? Masterpieces for the last days. And that's now, my friends. There's a power moving from beneath, which is after the working of the great enemy. I supposed our own people would stop softly, move very guardedly, and keep themselves aloof from all these new issues in regard to the circulating currency. This is not the devising of God, the changing of circulating currency. What will the changing of the circulating currency affect? Here it is. It will cause a state of things that will bring oppression to the poor and create great distress. It is one of the devil's schemes, and I thought those who believe the truth would not be deceived and at least agree upon this matter. But within the year 1896, as we just read about, matters have been presented to me which have made me tremble for our people. I have been where I heard conversations from those in positions of trust in the institutions. There was great warmth and controversy over the different positions taken. The light given me was, what is the light? This is the policy Satan has arranged to bring great distress. Now listen, would we know how we may best please the Savior? It is not engaging in political speeches, either in or out of the pulpit. It is considering with fear and trembling every word we utter. Where the people assemble to worship God, let not a word be spoken that shall divert the mind from the great central interest, Jesus Christ and Him crucified. The third angel's message is to be our burden of warning. The side issues are not for us to meddle with. The burden of the work is preach the word. There are those who have had an experience in preaching and laboring for the salvation of souls, from whom Christ has given His precious life. The work is the special enterprise to engross everyone who feeds the flock of God. It is a time now when voices will be heard. Quote, "Here, this is the way, walk in this path." But the Lord Jesus says, "Follow thou me. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness." The saving of souls is to be our personal work, from which nothing is of sufficient movement to divert the mind. Christ came to our world to save souls, to diffuse light amid the moral darkness. A living voice is heard, quote, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." That's the end of this. Now listen, friends, this is the goal. The goal all along since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913 is this endpoint. And they've been trying to stir this up for the longest time, and they think that gold and silver is going to back them, these elitists, and that they're going to be safe, and they're going to create the two-class system again. They're going to create the lower and the upper class. They're going to do away with this middle class, and you're either going to be in serfdom or you're going to be one of the elite doing and bidding their deeds. Don't get caught up in this mess. This is the mess. Now, there are tools of using this. Again, as I mentioned in the previous part, that, you know, gold and silver have a place, okay? And the place is, of course, bartering, but you're not going to be taking advantage of people. This is taking advantage of people. This is making and oppressing the poor. This is going to cause, you know, all kinds of issues that we have that we don't need, and it's going to distract everyone in the meantime. So, friends, just stay focused on Christ, continue in His word, and don't get caught up in silver, gold, and currencies and all of this. You see that it's working against you. God has a way, and His way is follow thou me. And he that followeth God and Christ shall not walk in darkness. So work on saving souls, and don't divert your mind, okay? Listen to the way, and the way is the truth, and the truth is the life. He alone is the one that will get you there. And it's a narrow way that we must follow. And it's not easy. Christ never said it's going to be easy. Everyone against will be against you. They're going to try to get you caught up in Satan's devices. And stay out of the politics. Stay out of the politics. Stay out of the currency issues. Now, it has a reason. And God doesn't want us to abandon every way that we have. But don't get caught up and don't put these things above God and say that this is going to save us and this is going to save our system. Christ is the only one that's going to save anything, and that's you and me. So thank you for listening, and God bless.